It's 2 minutes past. So welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting for the Toowoomba Regional Council for the 7th of December 2021. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I'd like to thank all of those of you in the room today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council social media channels. I acknowledge the Mayor, Portfolio Leader, Councillor Carl, Councillors, Acting CEO, Mr Brady, General Manager Stuart Summers of the Planning and Development Group. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guybil and Jarrawa peoples, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. I don't have any apologies. I think Councillor McMahon is here. Yep. There's no leave of absences.
Madam Chair.
Oh, beg your pardon, Councillor Bonhoff.
Yeah, thank you. At last month's meeting, I noted that I'll be an apology from 10:15 this morning until 12:15 p.m, not a.m, as I said last time.
Okay, very good.
you.
Do we need a motion to accept that? No. And we have one declaration, Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you, it's referring to item number 3, 2.41 CBD Heritage Incentive Policy, consideration of one application. And I inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter, as defined in section 150 EN of the Local Government Act 2009. The nature of my interest is as follows. The declarable conflict of interest arises because I part-own properties at 435 Ruthven Street and 2 Club Lane, Toowoomba in the CBD. The owners of the property at 433 to 435 Ruthven Street, Toowoomba, were a beneficiary of this policy when it was considered by Council at its meeting of 18 August 2015. Planning and Development Committee, 11 August 2015, item number 1, incentives monies received, including GST, was $3,381.32. I was not involved in the formation of the policy nor any decision on my business receiving an incentive under the policy. I have no connection to the building which is being discussed today. I wish to participate in the decision in relation to this matter. I acknowledge that eligible councillors must now determine, pursuant to section 150 ES of the Local Government Act 2009, whether I, 1, may participate in the decision about the matter, including by voting on the matter, 2, must leave the meeting, including any areas set aside for the public, and stay away from the meeting while the eligible councillors discuss and vote on the matter, or 3, may participate in the decision about the matter subject to conditions.
Are there any councillors like to ask Councillor McDonald a question? Councillor Summerfield?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for that, Jeff. You mentioned that you weren't involved in the formation of the policy. I think the original policy was approved in 2014.
That's right.
So we would have actually voted on it.
Yeah, I wasn't in that.
Whilst you weren't involved in creating the actual document, none of us were, but you did vote on adopting that policy.
No, I didn't. I was out of the room.
Oh, righto.
I've removed myself from every
because
conversation.
of your conflict of owning the building.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Anyone else seek any clarification from Councillor McDonald? Councillor Bonhoff?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you. Thanks, Councillor McDonald. Can you see how you could potentially gain or lose from what we're discussing today?
Definitely not.
So, councillors, does anyone want to propose a course of action from here? Councillor Summerfield? No, I'll just seek clarification from the CEO. Councillor McDonald doesn't need to leave for us to vote on it. No, Kirsten's saying no. Okay, so is there a seconder for Councillor Summerfield's motion that he stay? Councillor Bonhoff, all those in favour? It's carried, thank you. So we move to item...
And just the reason.
The reason, Councillor Summerfield?
The reason being that Councillor McDonald has never been involved in the process of this policy, whether it be the formation or development of it since that time, due to him owning a having a part ownership in a building.
in the CBD, and therefore I don't believe he has a conflict of interest. And in addition to that, this one is in Crow's Nest as well, so.
Business as usual. Okay. All right, with that, then we move to item number 3, which is the CBD... Oh, beg your pardon, Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually a leave of absence request.
Oh,
if I
right,
may
we're
do
going
it.
back, yeah.
In this part of the meeting, this coming Monday, the 13th, we have a special meeting of council at 1 p.m, and I'll need to be an apology for that, so I need to request a leave of absence, please.
Okay. And I require a motion. Can anyone move that? Councillor McDonald, Councillor Shine is to second. All those in favour to grant Councillor McMahon a leave of absence for Monday's special meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, now we move to item number 3, which is the CBD Heritage Incentive Policy consideration of one application with reference to Councillor McDonald's conflicts of interest. And Jade Bevington, you're going to take us through it. Thank you, Jade.
Good morning, councillors. Today we've brought forward a report that is in relation to Nolan's Block at 1 Thallon Street, Crow's Nest. We've received an application for grant funding under Council's Heritage Incentive Grant Policy. The building is a landmark building in Crow's Nest and does apply under the grant scheme. It has been assessed by our Heritage and Policy Architect as being applicable under the grant policy. The original veranda was demolished and then has been sympathetically reconstructed, and this has been proposed to be a positive outcome in terms of what has been reconstructed. We've prepared a small PowerPoint, which is attachment number 2, if we could have a look at that.
Technology.
So you can see that the building is to the west of the traditional town centre, and it is located, though on Thallon Street, it is technically also the New England Highway, so it's very visible as you move through the town centre. And because the funding is directly relevant to the main awning of the building, it's very visible. So any work that's being done on this building is definitely a positive contribution to the streetscape. If we could go to the next. This just gives you an understanding of what the original building looked like back in the day. It was very much an early contributor to life in Crow's Nest in terms of the day-to-day functioning and running of Crow's Nest, where you would gain your day-to-day produce. Our heritage architect likened it to the Kmart of its day, to give you an idea of what it might have been like. You all remember Salt's Antiques. They were there for quite some time. What the new owners have done is very sympathetic upgrade and really dialed back that green, which is a really positive contribution to the streetscape. So we put this picture in there to understand what it was looking like before the new owners have taken over. And if we scroll on to the next lot of images, you can see what it was like under Salt's. And if we keep going through, you can see now that the new owners have actually gone with a more sympathetic cream and light grey colour scheme, which really does work well with the traditional red brick of the facade, and they've kept with a natural timber for the new awning. The challenge with this particular project, traditionally with the Heritage Incentive Scheme, we like them to apply for the funding in advance of doing any work. The challenge was the advice that the applicant received from their structural engineer was that the condition of the awning was quite dangerous. The concern being that the awning was over a public footpath, and so the applicant did go ahead and do some of the work in advance of applying for the grant. They have since stopped work now that they've made that part of it safe and are going through the process of getting their planning and building approvals for the rest of the work and are waiting to receive feedback from us as to whether or not they're a recipient of the grant before they finish off the work. They're doing a lot of other work on site in terms of plumbing and drainage work and completely overhauling the entire building. This grant application relates only to the front facade work. The other thing that they've done, which is a vast improvement, is made sure that the new columns are set back from the curb so that when you pull your car up, you don't take out your front bumper. And they've also made sure that the columns don't sit directly on the paving so that we're not getting any wear of the bottom of the columns in terms of moisture degradation there. And these are just giving you some understanding of the work that they've done in terms of redoing the timbers at the front there. Just for information, the detailing. So they've gone to an engineer to make sure it's all above board. And our building certifiers are completely happy with the work that they've done. So that just gives you an idea of the work to date. So we're very pleased with the work that they've done from a heritage point of view. So that just takes us to the recommendation in the report, which is that Council approves the application as detailed below for grant funding under the CBD Heritage Incentives Policy, subject to receipt of their building approval for associated works. They have received 2 quotes for the work. We typically provide up to $10,000 as a maximum under our CBD grant, and their quotes are both over $20,000. So we've proposed to give them the maximum amount of $10,000.
Okay, thank you very much, Jade. Councillor Von Hoff?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, through you to Jade. Thank you so much, Jade. So when I was reading this, I couldn't work out why we'd only done $10,000 when they'd got the 2 quotes, and the full amount was $21,500 and something. And so I looked at the policy and it says 10,000 is the cap. My understanding is that the CBD Heritage Incentive Scheme is historically undersubscribed. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And the report talks about how, if approved, this will be the 3rd application payable this financial year, leaving a remaining 2021 grant budget of approximately $41,510. And so I question then if councillors would consider making an exception to the policy and paying out the entire $21,000 of the quote. And my reason for that is that we talk a lot, and I know all of us believe in wanting to really supercharge our regional communities, and this could be a real game changer for this community. And we've got money there, it's undersubscribed, and I would like to see us do the $21,000 as an exception over and above our usual policy. And I just ask that councillors consider that and see what they think about doing that.
Could I have the Acting CEO make a comment on going outside the policy regulation?
Obviously, council has that opportunity should they wish, but there'd probably have to be an amendment to put an amendment to the recommendation that's there. So that would have to be probably the best way to formally discuss that proposition.
Thank you. Happy to leave that just as it is, Councillor Von Hoff, for a minute.
Yeah, we'll my colleagues can ask their questions perhaps, but I'm happy to, where's the recommendation here? Alter that recommendation, move an alternate recommendation, subject to receipt of building approval for associated works, and have the grant, in that grant column, 10,000 plus, it'd be $11,596.
Okay, well, I'll leave that there for the minute. Councillor Summerfield?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm not in favour of that. I don't think we can pick favourites. Sorry.
But just, pardon me, Councillor Ninsui, if we've got an amendment that's been, it has, well...
It's only suggested at this stage.
I just want to hear what other councillors think about it.
Well,
if it's...
the acting CEO suggested the correct process is an amendment probably has to be put and seconded, and then we have some discussion or debate about it then. I stand to be corrected, but...
In essence, Councillor Carl, you're correct. As from a procedural perspective, that if you're going to debate you might call it a foreshadowed amendment. I suppose this moment of the meeting, it's just questions more so to Council's officer about the report or any other particular issues, and then if you want to move into debating a resolution, that I would suggest to Council to then move and second be it the recommendation or an amendment accordingly.
Councillor Von Hoff, where would you like to take it from here?
I think that councillors probably have questions just
Okay,
on the report itself.
Councillor Summerfield, did you want to ask Jade anything or make a comment apart from Councillor Von Hoff's suggestion?
Oh, look, I drove past, we'll put that to a side. I drove past on Friday and the building's looking fantastic, and it's going to be such a great asset for Crow's Nest. It's going to change the landscape at Crow's Nest. And so I'm really pleased to see that this is all going ahead. I'm really disappointed that they're experiencing the hurdles they are in relation to sewage out there. It's really holding them back from being able to open that business and get on with servicing that local community, which I believe is going to go gangbusters once it's open. So the good thing about this also, them actually applying for this funding, means that it'll be talked about in town, hopefully, and some of those other facades will get done up in Crow's Nest as well. We've often talked about it in the past about how this incentive needs to be advertised more, put in front of, and I was only thinking the other day after I drove past there, no, actually after I drove past the Norval Hotel, I thought we need to write to every business in every CBD in our region and advise them of this incentive policy, so that that's the owners, not the actual people renting the shops or whatever, to make sure that the owners are aware so that it is taken up. So, you know, there's another $60,000 there. We're not even at the end of the half of the financial year. There is opportunity for other people to take up that funding. And so I'd really love to see us write to them. Would that be possible, Jade?
Yes, absolutely.
So, I mean, at the Heritage Advisory Committee, we talk about it all the time, how to maximise participation. I think we've done a number of initiatives, haven't we?
I think the other thing to be aware of is that the policy is due for review, so we're actually going through the process at the moment of reviewing it and looking for additional ways to make it more user-friendly. And this was a good project that challenged the current policy. The fact that the policy at the moment says that you shouldn't have started the project, well, that's not always possible. So we want to review some of those sorts of things as well and make it so that, you know, it might be that you have started, but still come and talk to us and let's have a conversation and things like that. So try and remove some of the hurdles so that people are comfortable in coming and talking to us about the policy.
Thanks, Jade. Councillor Shine?
No, thanks, Chair. Just following on earlier comments, whilst this scheme is undersubscribed, there's still over 6 months to go in this financial year. Is that not the case? So
That's correct.
I think it may well be imprudent to go along the lines of that was suggested by Councillor Von Hoff, although, like everyone here, I'm sure, we think this is a magnificent venture by the owners, the new owners of Nolan's block out there, and it's going to, I agree, it's going to transform that town, and it is regrettable. I share Councillor Summerfield's concerns about the delays that may well be associated with council matters as well, and would hope that they'd be rectified as soon as possible. I would have thought that the amount of 10,000 is really quite a substantial help to to those concerned, bearing in mind the total cost of that part of the project.
Councillor Carol Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, while I agree with everyone, we all agree, and we went past it again yesterday, it's looking good already, and wonderful to see it loved and brought back to be the centre of the community, and I'm sure it'll make a huge difference. But I agree with us trying to get the message out. What we need to remember is this is only for heritage listed buildings. That's all it's for. And some of the buildings in some of our smaller towns, that leaves very few that would be eligible for this actual incentive. So, you know, some of our townships, and we've gone through this since the amalgamation, listing state and local government heritage listed buildings, and there really aren't a lot. So I think we need to keep that in mind, and perhaps if we were going to send letters and circularise, we would have a list of those, and would make it a whole lot easier than going to a whole lot of others. But it is wonderful to see in a smaller town to have this as a huge and big statement building, and has so much history attached to it in that township. And, you know, the pig sales and the sales, animal sales, calf sales, were held where the park is now in Crow's Nest. So many changes over the years this building would have seen. So wonderful to see it treasured and coming back to productive life, and I think it's fantastic we can give them 10,000. I'll wait for the debate, because we've got many wonderful buildings in the CBD too, which we don't want to list one against the other, that have already been, have had the benefit of this incentive. Thank you.
I think the other thing to be aware of with the review of the policy is that at the moment it is very CBD focused, CBD Toowoomba and certain townships, but there are other heritage listed buildings that don't tick that box. So part of the review of the policy is also looking at other areas, for example, Nobby and places like that do have heritage buildings that aren't currently on that list of CBD towns. So part of the review of the policy is saying, well, you know, do we actually broaden that and look more broadly at heritage buildings in general?
Any further questions for Councillor McDonald?
Just a question, just to my own mind confirmation, having not been involved in the policy making or decisions, but I do understand, given that we were a beneficiary, that the first iteration of the policy was $1 for every $2, so a third, and now it's gone 1 to 1, so it's 50% up to the $10,000 figure to get those. And I tend to agree that with Councillor Summerfield that once this one is done and becomes public, that it may well see hopefully a bit of a chain reaction on that. This building, I would assume, and just clarification if I could, would also be eligible, if you like, for township infrastructure incentive policies as well, as far as perhaps a reduction in infrastructure charges, being an economic development area.
Yes, if they were paying any infrastructure charges, but I'm not sure they are. I don't think they're actually expanding the square meterage of the building, so there's probably no infrastructure charges payable.
Okay, so if there was, they would be eligible for that.
If there was, they'd be eligible. Yep.
So perhaps that's something that could be discussed later on as well. But yeah, I look forward to, well, I won't be part of the review of the policy, but look forward to it when it happens in any regard. Thanks, that's all.
Jade, can I just seek some clarification about the heritage list, the nature of the heritage listing? It's local and state, is that correct? I thought the one that we'd done in Oakey, that building, was that heritage listed? I didn't think that it was.
I'm not sure, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No.
All right, we might talk about that. Yeah, okay. Yes, true. Okay, now, Councillor McMahon.
Chair, thanks. Look, just a comment. I love the building. It looks amazing in its current format. I probably don't agree that we should be going over and above the policy at this stage, but rather look at a review of the policy. I suppose my question, I chair the RADAC committee, which talks regularly about the challenges of disability access in retrofitting, especially heritage buildings. And it's all right when you build a new building, but when you're trying to get it up to code with an older building, and it's a hard job, it really is. And I notice in this one, there's obviously a lot of the way we did things 50, 80 years ago, and and that doesn't often meet today's best practice. For example, there's this high gutter right across the front of the shop that a wheelchair probably couldn't even get from the road, those kind of things. And I don't at all deny that I think the owners will have thought of all these things and to try and encourage accessibility to their premises, but it would be really good to see in a moving forward of a policy like this an inclusion of disability access in heritage buildings as part of the policy, because it's costly and it's a hard job. And if we're going to look at the review, I'd welcome something in it about that. But other than that, just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really interesting perspective, and I think that would be something worth exploring as part of the review of the policy.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. I think there's lots to love about this renovation of this building, but I note in the report the tessellated tile pattern. I think that's one of my favourite parts of this. But they do say the creation of a threshold for each doorway for accessibility, so perhaps they're already addressing that. Don't know.
Yeah, I did read some comments through it. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Any further questions for the officer? Councillor Antonio?
Oh, simply a comment. I agree with Councillor Summerfield. I think this funding pool is there to partner people in doing exactly what we're planning here, and I'm comfortable with where it is, and no doubt a review will get us thinking about other options, but I'm comfortable with where we are.
Okay. Councillor Von Hoff, I'll go back to you.
Yeah, thank you.
What
Thanks,
would you like
Madam
to
Chair.
do from here?
I've appreciated hearing from my colleagues and listened to what they've had to say, and I'm happy to stick with the committee recommendation of the $10,000 and look forward to the review, and also just really encourage businesses that might be eligible for this to please apply, because there is money there to be spent this financial year. Thank you.
Well said, thank you. Okay, so the recommendation is there before you. Do I have someone to move the recommendation that Council approve the application for $10,000 for the CBD incentives policy for 1 Thallon Street, Crow's Nest? Councillor Antonio and Councillor Melissa Taylor, all those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Jade.
Thank you.
Item number 4 is the financial contribution to council in lieu of roadworks conditioned as part of the Aldi development in Highfields Road, Highfields. Dave Quinlan is going to take us through that. Thank you, Dave.
Madam Chair, through you to the Acting CEO, just a question. Oh, my iPad's gone off here. Question to you, Mr Brady. In the body of the report, the attachments, you can see quite clearly there in the report, Central Highfields. I've made a declaration in the past, Council's determined that I don't have conflict. Do I need to declare that as nothing has changed or not?
Yeah, look, I don't believe that you would have conflict. That said, it's the individual councillor's choice. It's under ordinary business, so your interest is no greater than a significant proportion of other community members, and that includes all people in a suburb. So in the examples that have been given to us, so that's the way I view it. Ultimately, the decision sits with the individual councillor. Thank you.
Okay. So, based on that and in the, as evidenced in the body of the report, I feel comfortable, unless councillors want to ask any questions at this point.
Do any councillors want to ask a question of Councillor Carl? Councillor Taylor, did you have a question?
No, I don't have a question, Madam Chair. I think the Acting CEO has said it, and in previous time it's been mentioned, this is ordinary council business. Councillor Carl has nothing more to gain or lose than anybody else who lives in the suburb of Highfields, and perhaps even people who drive through there. So I think, it's a long bow to draw that he should gain anything out of staying in the room.
Thanks. You comfortable with that, Councillor Carl? Councillor McMahon?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment. I also have declared in the past, I have a significant related party, my brother, who owned property in the Central Highfields region and a couple of 100 metres from this. That property is now sold, so I won't be declaring any more conflicts of that nature. Thank you.
Very good. If it was tenuous to start with, it's even more so now, do you think? All right. So Councillor Quinlan, away you go. Mr Quinlan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, councillors. This morning I'll be talking about what's commonly become known as the Aldi Roundabout. You may recall late last year the Aldi development, the supermarket, was very much under construction. They were training staff and beginning to stock shelves, etc. The contractor engaged to undertake the roadworks that were conditioned as part of the development ran into some trouble in that when they went to construct the works on the road, they had approvals from council. Telstra had a fibre optic line with what I suppose someone like myself would call a T-junction in the fibre optic line. There was no pit at this T-junction, and it was in the verge where this T-junction occurred. With the widening of the road, widening of the road associated with the roundabout, it was to cover that T-junction in the fibre. Even though there was no change to the surface, Telstra said that they required a pit, and a pit could not be within the road pavement, so then put a stop work order on the contractor. Obviously that was distressing to the developer, Aldi, and of course it was not very beneficial to people who would have had employment there. They were determined or desired to open before Christmas, understandably. So on that basis, council entered into an infrastructure agreement with Aldi for them to undertake temporary works to enable a temporary traffic solution while a more permanent solution was devised. That infrastructure agreement involved a $500,000 financial security, a bond from Aldi. Since that time, council, and you can see in attachment 5, council has moved to undertake design work to upgrade Highfields Road in that vicinity, Kratzky-O'Brien intersection down through to Rogers Drive, which would take into account this area. Those design works aren't complete at this point, but there is significant, there's a stormwater design issue, surface levels are quite important, and there is underground services to relocate as part of those works. The developer, Aldi, and the contractor, who were both part of the infrastructure agreement with council, have indicated that they would prefer to make a financial contribution of $500,000 to council in lieu of undertaking the roadworks. There are some benefits to council given the works that council is seeking to undertake down that road, and some synergies and benefits to council, particularly in terms of the design work. As I've said, the stormwater in the area is somewhat complex, and surface levels, it's quite a flat area of road, and getting that stormwater to work properly will require a certain amount of further work. The movement of the fibre along the road, after much investigation, because council has widened the road reserve to the south along Highfields Road, it is quite reasonable that the realignment of that fibre is actually trunk works, as is the stormwater works. Now, to ensure that council isn't, if you like, being overly generous to the developer in terms of a $500,000 contribution in lieu of the works, there is a report in the attachment from Baker Rosso that shows that the value of the $500K, if taken as part of works on that road, excluding the realignment of the infrastructure, which indeed would be trunk and on council's cost anyway, seems to be quite reasonable. So on that basis, given that there are some benefits to council, the $500K would appear to be commensurate with works if taken as part of works undertaken by council. There's some further benefits by only having one contractor, etc. The temporary works remain in place. The IA spoke about those temporary works being maintained by the developer till the 1st of December 2022, which would still remain in place. The recommendation is that the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO, be authorised to enter into a change, an amendment to that IA to enable the $500K as a contribution for roadworks rather than the developer undertaken them.
Good, thank you, Dave. Councillor Carol Teller.
Just a question, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to David, has Telstra begun or completed the upgrade work in that road reserve?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, indeed, that work hasn't been undertaken as yet. The design work for that, when there's a movement of that sort of infrastructure, would fall to somebody else. Telstra has a view that it's their infrastructure, it remains in place. Design work is actually undertaken to move that infrastructure, and that design work is actually approved by Telstra. Yes, well, the works, or maybe not by us directly, but by a contractor engaged by us on our coin, yes.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. But we don't have any, I suppose further to that, we don't have any concerns that it won't be done when we're ready to do the work on the road.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's not unusual to realign services, particularly telcos. It is unfortunately quite costly sometimes to realign fibre. I'm not an expert on fibre communications at all, but it is not, in a broad sense, it is not a really expensive one.
Dave, can I ask, given what's the time frame for the work that we're looking at doing on Highfields Road, and given the sort of escalating costs of supplies and things, are we factoring in how much it potentially will cost?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A good question. I suppose we've taken the report from Baker Rosso as at a point in time, which is now. Can we predict exactly where we'd be in 12 months' time? Possibly not. There would probably be, and indeed Mr Brady might have a comment on this, but the work we've been doing recently is anticipating probably an index in the construction industry, probably twice that of the CPI. So we're probably looking at 7-8% at the moment, as opposed to a CPI sitting around 3 or 4%.
So what's the indication for when that work along Highfields Road is when we're thinking about doing that?
Fortunately, Mr Brady's here. He might be better placed to comment.
Okay.
Councillors, I refer you to attachment 5, which I brought into this report, which does indicate on page 10 of 11 of that report, page 75 out of 354 on your board books. That's, we're looking at a 22-23 commencement of construction, so next financial year with completion the following financial year. So we're still, and as David has pointed out, we're in the design phase at the moment, so it's still sort of early days in the design phase, but things are moving reasonably well to keep to that timeline. That said, the risks that you mentioned, Chair, are definite risks in be it this project or any other project Council's doing at the moment, the increase in costs. So this report was back at the start of the year, but at this stage hopefully we've got enough in contingencies and that to cover off on a few issues that may arise. So, and we'll bring Telstra on board as and when we need to in regards to relocation, so that'll probably be in the next 6 months at some point. That will get them sorted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Shine?
No, thanks, Chair. Just wondering, I realise you weren't involved in this project until recently, but why was the problem with Telstra not foreseeable right at the start? You know, is there some oversight, or is there some lack of cooperation from the telco in this instance?
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly it was an issue not identified by the contractor, the developer, or indeed by council officers. And I suppose one of the challenges is that we did view that there was no pit there. There was a T-junction in the fibre. It was a surprise to council officers that Telstra did then require a pit and then did require the fibre to be removed. It was not identified by officers. We did see it there. Certainly we conditioned the movement of services to be undertaken by the developer typically, or the contractor, even if it were trunk works and then ultimately coming through on our coin. But indeed it was a surprise to officers and I believe the developer in this instance. Telstra did indicate to us that perhaps there should have been a pit there in the past. Had there been a pit there, I think it would have drawn our attention to it. And yes, we do not put Telstra pits under blacktop, but the surprise to us was that Telstra indicated it wanted a pit there.
Councillor Carl.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions. Comment first to Councillor Shine's question about does Telstra cooperate or not. Here's one that I can talk about with some past experience. In fact, having been an estimator designer and designing part of the fibre network for Highfields. Part of the reason and challenge I had back them days was actually a communication from council as to their future growth plan and subdivision layout. So equally, there was a challenge from both sides. Yes, and from a safety point of view, we as council don't often put manholes in the middle of roads for obvious reasons. A solid fibre lay network, in other words, directly trenched or ploughed into the ground, and a solid joint is not uncommon in fibre network, and particularly when future urban layout is very unclear, as received information from local government authorities, not just this one either, I might add, that I used to deal with. My question is on attachment 4 of 5, the operational works plan. In the key, it alludes to existing services, EXT, as existing telecommunications. I don't seem to be able to see that on the plan submitted by Aldi or ACOR consultants. David, can you point out to me where the fibre actually is in the context of that intersection? And I asked specifically in relation to council assuming trunk costs.
Just one moment, Councillor. I'll see if I can see it on the attachments that we have here today. Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure I can see it on the documentation I have here today, but if we bring up the, what I would say is looking at the drawing that we have up on the overhead, it is in the, and being aware that in this particular diagram, north is to the, more or less to the right of the page, but it's in that, if we take into account that Aldi corner, what would be actually the southeast corner, it's somewhere around in that area where the, and that is, yeah, where the roundabout would go, the widening of that black top into that southeast corner goes over where the join in the fibre is. In a broader sense, we have widened the road reserve on the southern side of Highfields Road. So originally the fibre was aligned to an appropriate alignment from the real property boundary. Once we widen the road, of course, the fibre ends up on the wrong alignment, for want of a better word, and when we do that, it's reasonable that it be a trunk cost to realign it down the length of the road as part of road works.
I guess my next question would be then, I don't think that a roundabout was ever envisaged at that point beyond recent times and the sale of land to Aldi. That'd be a fair comment, given that Lauder Drive is a privately owned road.
Oh, it's absolutely the case that indeed, well, back in the day when the fibre would have been put there, there would not have been the anticipation of the development on the southern side of Highfields Road. There was not an anticipation of there being a roundabout there in the future. Indeed, the roundabout itself was conditioned as non-trunk and on the developer's coin. However, other services which are trunk that might need to be relocated, not because of the roundabout, but just relocated or reconstructed generally, such as stormwater, taking water from the northern side of Highfields Road down through and to a disposal point far to the south, by going to Mary MacKillop to the west and certain other stormwater going to the east and down Kratzky Road, they would reasonably be trunk costs on council's coin.
Councillor McDonald?
Thanks, Madam Chair. If I could just go back to the financial side of things, through you, Madam Chair, through to David, the $500,000, that would then also include some element of that to go into the design of that, or is the design already included in the funds in the 21-22 financial year, 1.5 million?
Through you, Madam Chair. Indeed, Councillor, the design, there was an operational works design that had indeed been approved, and they were to commence construction of it. So that design work, from the developer's perspective, has actually been undertaken. It is true that should council wish to change things, let me start again. A developer is reasonably conditioned to undertake works to the extent of the impact of their development. Should we wish to change that design to fit into some broader context that we may have along that road to deal with other issues such as stormwater, that would reasonably be on our coin. So if we were to, for instance, say, no, we want the surface a little bit higher, a little bit lower, etc., to get the right grade along that road, that would reasonably be at our cost, I believe. They were conditioned to undertake these works to the extent of their impact on the network and their connection to the network.
I guess if I just follow up, I'm just flagging that we won't expect a budget review for that amount of 21-22 of 1.5 million. It's in the current budget to complete those works this financial year. That'd be right. That'd be fair to say, Mike, through you.
The Acting CEO to make a comment.
Sorry. Councillors, the financial elements there for note in the table on page 10 of 11. So this wouldn't be adding into that. There wouldn't be any amendment to whatever we currently have in our budget for this current financial year. The contribution would be payable and would have a flow-on impact into 22, 23, 23, 24 financial years. So that's where the funding for this is really, in regards to the Aldi Roundabout, more reflective of the construction costs and that which are in the next two financial years. So in respect to this year, I don't foresee any need to be amending that project budget at this point in time.
So then I guess we flag that when our next capital program comes for 22-23 and 23-24, that'll be recognised within that to maintain our 165 limit.
We recognise contributions once they are paid. So commitment to pay and paid can be a bit of time between both. So I just want to make sure that from our capital budget point of view, we, as you can see in that report, the previous report, it wasn't including the Aldi Roundabout. So as and when that becomes, inverted commas, part of the project, that gets recognised at that point. So when the payment comes through.
If I may make a comment, Madam Chair, yes, we would receive those monies. If this was, we would receive those monies potentially in this year, or if it made it easier for accounting, we could actually indeed receive the monies in next financial year as part of the IA, given that the temporary works will remain in place at their expense until 1st of December next year. And we could receive it if it was easier financially next year and then include that in the capital works budget.
Well, let's have a look at what BR2 looks like, and that might determine just what that is when we get to February, March.
Just on that point, I guess, can you explain to me, Dave, so we're holding the bond, are we not actually in possession of the 500,000 at this point?
Madam Chair, the bond is held as a bank guarantee, not as cash at this time.
Sure. Councillor Carl?
Through you, Chair, David, or might be through to Acting CEO. Are we confident, given the timing of the works, that given the current state of affairs with materials and supply and the rise in costs, that 500 is somewhat eroded away in value by the time we actually enter into the works to upgrade this? Have we allowed, has Baker also considered that in their report to us?
Through you, Madam Chair, the Baker Rosso report does come in with an estimate that is, how will I state this, mildly less than 500k, sort of in the 450 to 490 mark. So you could argue that there is a percentage in there. I believe the developer and the contractor are looking for a greater level of certainty, and I don't think would be overly concerned by that certain amount of money. You are correct. It is important to turn our mind to this. That's why we got the Baker Rosso report, which, in fairness, was not, which was paid for indeed by the developer. Despite appearances, I'm indeed not Santa Claus. But it's important for us to, I think, yes, you make a good point. Is the 500k enough? We believe it is, if undertaken with the works, the other additional works in the area. It would indeed be a different question if we were undertaking no works on Highfields Road. Would they have more costs than 500k if there were no other works being done, and you had an entirely separate road closure costs, etc.? Well, yes, I believe it would be higher, but taken into account as part of those other works where we're up for the trunk costs of the cost for trunk relocation, I think it's reasonable.
So you're confident that any escalation in price between, despite being bundled, as you say, a bundled package with other works, you're confident that there's enough, the value of that 500,000 won't be eroded away by the time we eventually get to do this work and it's programmed into the...
Through you, Madam Chair, I think if any of us could absolutely accurately predict what will inflation do over the next 12 months, then we probably wouldn't be working for council.
I guess more the question is, are you confident that we'll undertake these works in a suitable time frame, so in fact we realise the benefit of that 500,000 contribution in tomorrow's dollars? It won't be eroded away with that inflation. The likely timing of that to happen, when we realise the benefit of that contribution, and the only real realisation of that contribution is not money in the bank, it's it's money on the road. So,
Thank you, Councillor Carl. In essence, what's been offered is reasonable. It's very hard, as Ms Quinlan put, to accurately determine a differential between what would council have to pay for in any case and what the developer here. So it's not a hard and fast black and white line. In regards to the works, the program construction phase is the next 2 financial years. Okay, so we're looking at design being completed in the next calendar year, 2022, with construction getting underway thereafter. So it's we're working towards that. At this stage, things are generally on track to meet our timeframes and our budgets. So that's probably the best information at this point in time. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Councillor Carl has asked a good question, and for the sake of transparency, I would point out that under the current infrastructure agreement, the developer and contractor are to maintain the temporary works until the works are done, and that is till the 1st of December next year, 2022. So the works can't cease at that point. As you know, that they are temporary works. There is some level of maintenance, a greater level of maintenance on them, although it's not a huge expense. The temporary works aren't desirable in the long term. I'm sure many of us have been through there. It's a smaller diameter roundabout. It does receive a bit more wear. It isn't giving quite the manoeuvring that you would like for the heavy vehicles that deliver to the supermarkets there. It also doesn't have quite the effect on the east to west speeds of the cars. There's not quite as much deflection through a narrow roundabout. So we want to get the other works done. But there is temporary lighting there at that roundabout. You might have seen, I think there's 3 lights and they are on hire. If the works were delayed substantially, then council may have some costs, although they would be in the context of the works comparatively small. We would have some maintenance cost if we did not undertake the works sooner than 1st of December 2022.
Thank you, Dave. With that, I don't think we have any further questions.
No.
I'll beg your pardon, Councillor Summerfield.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So just going into what Councillor Carl asked, in the report it says the IAA required a temporary compact roundabout to be constructed and maintained for up to 2 years until the ultimate works as conditioned could be completed. So the up to 2 years, as you just stated, Dave, is the end of next year, and yet here we are looking at 23-24 financial year to be as part of this project as well. And the design was mentioned earlier by Councillor McDonald that would be completed in this financial year, but the conversation then went on later to say that no, it'll go into the following financial year. So to me, there's a lot of confusion here. I think we need to have a proper timeline on this to ensure that we deliver within budget, within financial years that it's allocated to. And it's important for the people of Highfields that this work is done, because I regularly hear complaints about what it's like at school time at that intersection. So I'm really more confused now than what I was when I read the report, and I don't think that's very helpful.
If I could, through you, Madam Chair. In simple terms, if we were to construct that roundabout now, it would be difficult for us to perfectly match in with the design intent from Highfields, Kratzky, O'Brien intersection through to Rogers Drive. With that work being undertaken as it is now, it will potentially vary levels to deal with stormwater, etc. There are challenges with traffic in that area. My own children went to Mary MacKillop for some years, although it's been some years since they were there. And that is a busy place at that time of day. The roundabout is probably the best solution, although we would agree that a larger diameter full roundabout, as actually conditioned in the operational works, would be better. We could potentially move the works more quickly. That would have the risk of not fitting in, I think, as well necessarily with the design works in the area. We also wouldn't want to be seen to be constructing a roundabout and then reconstructing the same roundabout.
Mr Brady might have a little bit more information there, Councillor Summerfield, in terms of a time frame.
Councillors, as I said, the project's in the design phase at the moment. The design phase is going through to mid next year, okay? June, July next year, the design phase is deemed to be completed. We are looking at some potential early works starting in the last quarter of this current financial year. And when we talk about early works, that's talking about things such as Telstra, utilities, water and other services, power, with undergrounding the power through there and those sorts of things. So some of those may commence then. So as the design gets completed and we know that we're certain on the alignments that we want those services to go, we can kick those off and get them going. In regards to the bulk of the construction, the main construction phase, that is from towards the end of next calendar year through into the next financial year. There's about a 12 to 15-month construction phase. There's a lot of work to happen in that area. That whole area is going to be a construction zone for the best part of probably, once we take into account all the early works, over the next 2 years, that whole area will have significant construction happening, be it undergrounding services, such as electrical services, be it the Telstra relocations, be it water mains. Concurrent to this job, our water and waste team have got a major water main going through that area as well. There's a lot happening in that whole Highfield Central area over the next couple of years, and it's going to be basically one construction zone for the best part of the next two or so years. And I think that's probably the story out there at the moment. Exactly when this roundabout, the day this roundabout will be started and finished, well, there's actually 3 roundabouts potentially being built, this one being a smaller one. So there's quite a number of those sorts of things happening. I've just pulled up our monthly project report that was reviewed yesterday, so that's the current information.
Any further questions for the officer? Okay, so the recommendation is there before you. Can I have someone move that recommendation? Councillor Carol Taylor, seconder. Councillor McDonald, all those in favour? Councillor Summerfield. Oh, beg your pardon, sorry. Yep, it's carried unanimously. Thanks, Dave. Item number 5 is the Development Assessment Regional Development Statistics Report. Thank you, General Manager Summers.
Good morning, councillors. I'll commence my report with a mea culpa. On graph 4, and thanks to Councillor Jeff who picked this up, we had left off the October number of new lots. That's that red column right at the end there. It should have been replaced in the information you currently have in front of you. But basically, October was somewhat more productive than September numbers. The RALs, or the DAs that approve lots, not seal them, but approve them. October we approved 60 new lots compared to 1 in September. Lots that were sealed, we were down a little bit. September was 41 lots were sealed, and October 36 lots. Approved dwellings, we had 51 in September and 82 in October. And approved units, we had 4 in October, which compares to the previous month of 10 lots. The total value in terms of construction cost in October was pretty much double that of in September. September was 27.3 million, or thereabouts, and October was 47 million, approximately.
You might have got yourself a bit confused there, Mr Summers. Just when you said that you had more lots sealed in September than in October, it's not what the
No, in
graph
October.
shows.
Sorry, did I say that?
Yeah, I think you did. Sorry,
I've
that's
tripped
all right.
over my own
Thank
tongue.
you.
I'm sorry. Thank you for picking that up. No, October was 36 lots were sealed, and September 41. Oh, aren't they?
Sorry, it's just being pedantic, I suppose, but the graph is showing
Yep.
that there's a number of sealed lots are more in October than September. On graph 4,
Okay.
the one that we have here.
Okay.
So maybe it's incorrect.
There could be.
On the screen, looks right. Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Look, I'll take that on board and have a closer look at that.
This is the updated one, is that right? Yeah.
Just in terms of trends, I asked the plumbing chaps to give me a feed out on what's happening, and it's quite interesting. From January, for the period really from January this year through to November, and in January we started off with 61 plumbing approvals, and it rose steadily during the year to a peak of about 156 and 130 and 127, and then it's tailed off to, in November, 67 again. So you've got the bell curve, and that reflects the rush of housing approvals following the federal government incentives. So there's a bit of an indicator there. I've removed from that figure, of course, the hundreds of approvals that are going on out at the Wellcamp Airport at the moment, because that would have distorted the figures. But it is interesting that some of our building stats are beginning to indicate that there's a tailing off, and that's probably because of 2 things. One is there is no longer an incentive by the government, but also our building industries are pretty much at maximum at the moment, and it's difficult to actually get builders to build houses or tradesmen to do all the work that needs to be done. And so what's happening is that that work is settling down and tailing off at a little higher rate than certainly was prevalent before. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of interference. Prevalent before the federal government incentives. So I just thought I'd share that with you. And Councillor Summerfield also asked me a question about the news item on the units at Mort Street, which I'll just quickly cover. The Mort Street approval complied with the then planning scheme for the requirements. That was version 21 of the planning scheme, which required 1 space per 2-bedroom dwellings and 1 visitor space per 5 dwellings. Since then, I think it was Amendment 16 or 17, that was amended by Council to 2 spaces per building, per 2-bedroom dwelling, plus 1 space per 4 units for visitors. So the 9 spaces that were provided, as reported in the paper, were correct in terms of the then planning controls, but Council has increased the standard there now, so there would in fact be, I think, probably instead of 9, there'd be 11 spaces, or something like that.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Stuart, for bringing that up. I was really disappointed in that, and it's a shame that that's the outcome that we've got there, and thank goodness there's an amendment in place now to stop it in future.
Yep, well, it's actually in the scheme. So version 26 has an improved ratio of parking.
Good,
Yep.
thank you.
Any questions, councillors?
Councillor Von Hoff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, through you to General Manager. Could we get table 4 up, please? So we've got, when we get it there, it's going to show that, as you were saying, Stuart, this month there were 60 lots approved. Last month there was 1. And there are, looking at that, it's hard to draw a through line for a trend. There's big variations. And last week, Council put out a press release saying that Council expects to approve more than 450 new lots by the end of February due to current construction efforts by existing developers. So when I look at this and I read that there's 450 new lots expected by the end of February, can you explain to me how we can say that it's going to be a dramatic change in what we've done this month and what we've done last month? You know, the average across those, if we take December, January, February, it would be an average of 150 lots approved per month, whereas, you know, this month, October we did 60, September we did 1. So that would be an astronomical jump. Can you explain that to me, please?
Yep, there's a lot of construction going on at the moment. It's going full tilt. A number of estates, there's about 13 of them, have got contractors working on the next stage or 2 stages of their development. That takes approximately 4 to 6 months of construction time to get that done, and it's not until that construction is completed and those stages go on maintenance that they can actually be sealed. And then once the lots are sealed, they can be registered at the titles office and people can take possession of those lots. What generally happens with those 400 odd lots we were just talking about is they're often pre-sold, or the developers tend to pre-sell a number of those lots, and it's good that it makes the bankers very happy when the developer can say, well, I've pre-sold 50% of my lots already, or 25% or 30% or whatever it is. It's seldom 100%. And so, because in the way land development works, that's when it's produced, that is normally sold by the developer. That's part of it. Or in cahoots with a real estate agent. But a lot of developers tend to sell their own land. They cut out the middleman.
Yep.
So that's how we know. We know that those are the lots that are being constructed at the moment. Now, there are a number of factors that can intervene there, weather being a particular one, shortage of supplies can be another one. However, at the best guess of our engineers, that's the figure that I have been given, that's the number of lots that are involved.
Okay, thank you. So of those 450 new lots,
Yep.
Expected to be approved by the end of February, are any of those already pre-sold?
Oh, yes. I would assume 50% or whatever. It's during that period that developers pre-sell. So they can't really pre-sell prior to that, but once they've got their operational works approval and they're in there with their Tonka toys, building the roads and putting in sewer and water and stormwater and what have you, they can actually then enter into pre-sale agreements.
Thank you.
Councillor Kerry-Shine?
No, thanks, Chair. If I could get a couple of questions in before morning tea. The item 8, if I could refer to item 8, page 87, it's the new temporary incentive policy applications.
Yep, table.
I'm just wondering if you could give us some details about those, what monetary consideration applies to each of those two.
In terms of actual figures?
Yeah.
Yes, I have to take that on notice.
Okay.
I don't have those figures there. So I'll take that on notice.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay, might ask my second question. Last week we had a discussion here, probably confidential, I can't go into it, but it was in relation to traffic lights and roundabouts, and which has nothing to do principally with you, but it was it was advised to us that constructing lights and roundabouts in existing subdivisions can be quite expensive because it will require often taking triangular bits off existing allotments surrounding the proposed roundabouts. In other words, there has to be a resumption of properties or part resumption of properties, etc. Quite expensive. And my question then was, well, why don't we in our planning approval of subdivisions for greenfield sites, if we don't already, why don't we don't approve, say, a rectangular
We do,
lot?
actually. It's a requirement on every intersection
So
that they have a...
It is now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, but it wasn't years ago.
Maybe not years ago.
So,
In old estates, maybe not. But certainly today, yeah, there's the corner is nipped.
cut off.
Yeah, to allow for works and what have you. Normal intersectional works, actually, not regardless of whether there's a roundabout or not. I suspect, yeah, well, I'm not privy to the conversation that was had the other day, but it is not always the easiest thing to do is just move from roundabouts to lights. There may be more resumption required of adjoining land for the lights if you're going to get proper swept paths that are going to protect the lights and all sorts of things. But we certainly have a very eminent engineer sitting over here and over here. So if you wanted to take some technical...
Perhaps over morning tea.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr Mayor?
If I can just comment, Councillor Von Hoff asked a question about pre-sales. When that press release went out, I was approached by a number of agents who claimed that the majority of that land was pre-sold.
That's correct.
And I just wonder if your department has a connection with, you know, that early stage pre-selling, any connection with the agents who are doing that. You know, they came to me and told me what they'd done. It's a bit of a shame they hadn't gone to you and told you exactly where they were.
Yeah, no, well, it's known around. I mean, for years, when I first arrived, I heard about one developer, well known in the town, who had a very long list of people who wanted to buy land from him. It's not new. Basically, and once the construction approvals have been given through the operational works approvals, then the developers are free to enter into contracts, I suppose you would say, intentions to buy. They can't actually execute those until, of course, they can be registered at the titles office. But there are always a percentage of the lots that are pre-sold at that stage, normally by the developers, less so by real estate agents generally, unless those real estate agents are working with the developer, which sometimes occurs. They have different ways of going about it. For instance, the avenues, the developer sells their own land there, they don't use agents, generally speaking. And and that's pretty much the pattern. But there's a lot, once the operational works is happening and the construction is rolling out, that's when the pre-sales occur. And when in demand, of course, you get a much higher percentage of the lots that are pre-sold. At lower demand, like we were faced with a couple of years ago, there wasn't a lot of pre-sales or sales for that matter. It was a couple a week.
All I'll say is surely with the pre-sales and the enthusiasm there is for people from elsewhere to come here, there must be tremendous incentive for the developers to develop their land right now.
Absolutely.
In 12 months' time that may not be there. So I'm just wondering if a connection between yourselves and some of the agents who are hounding me at this point in time, we might be able to get some real facts on the table as to exactly what's
it's
happening.
probably the developers we need to be talking to rather than the agents. You're talking about the real estate agents. Is that who you're talking about? Yeah, because it's the developers that actually produce the lots, and they're the ones that are sniffing the wind for the market all the time, because there is that awful overshoot possibility that and no developer wants to be caught with heaps and heaps of lots that they can't sell because, they spend 20, 30, 40, $50 million constructing the next stage. That's a lot of money to be hanging on to if you can't sell those lots. And that's why it's comforting for all to have the pre-sales agreements in place. And that, if they can get 50% pre-sales, they have no problem with their banker. But the real estate agents, I'm not sure what message they're trying to send. Maybe they need to go and talk to the developers and see if they can't be doing business with them.
Oh, look, I think in this particular case, the real estate agents and the developers are intertwined.
Yep.
There is one. And I was just thinking that there must be some incentive now, surely, for developers in this community to provide more land. There must be, despite some of the criticism.
And there is, we just approved 1,000 lots up on the hill. And those developers are working with us to get the first few stages going. So it is ongoing. It's happening. Yep. It's finance, it's economics, it's development, and developers need to be sniffing that economic wind all the time. Because they really don't want to be caught out.
Mr Mayor, if I may, you are making reference, are you, to that you can't buy a block of land. It's very difficult for people to buy a block of land in Toowoomba, is that?
I'm making reference to it, yes, I am. Some of the agents are saying they don't have land for sale. Certain developers, and I won't mention any names, get their land organised, get it to the stage where they can pre-sell. Just goes like that.
Yep.
And naturally, the agents have an interest in this as well. But they're a good source of information for me, some of the agents. When 41 blocks sold by one agent 1 month, 26 of which went to interstate people who are going to come to Toowoomba and live in Toowoomba and build a new house next year. That's it.
Of course, the difficulty we are facing at the moment is the fact that most local builders anyway, and I think it's fairly general, their books are full going out into the middle or end of next year. So even if you can buy a block, at the moment, there's difficulty in actually getting a house built on it, principally because of labour and the number of builders, but also, the supply line is still not fully functioning and caught up with everyone. But certainly, look, it's in the developer's interest, and there's certainly additional stages to push ahead and develop land. There is land to develop. It's really that marketplace wariness, I think, that is probably ensuring that there's no mad rush. The avenues are constructing 3 stages at the moment. Now, they normally do 1 stage at a time, but they've taken a punt and are constructing 3 stages. They should be finalised early in the new year. So, yep.
And I mean, I suppose in response to, council should be just zoning more land for sale, then there is developable land for sale. And if the developers don't feel that they want to bring it on, or, that's something we can only monitor what's sort of in our system at the moment and release those figures to the public. So,
Yep. And there are some frustrations in terms of some of the approvals around some issues. In fact, we were discussing some this morning, but I guess that's rough and tumble and the way of development. Often there are issues that pop up that we're not expecting that can hold up a development approval or can hold up the construction for whatever reason, not just the weather. And we're facing all those issues.
Councillor McDonald?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr Summers. Really, it was around the opportunity to talk just briefly about the special meeting that's on Monday around Toowoomba Region Futures, which is a longer-term view of the region, and perhaps, given it's a special meeting open to the public, did you want to just explain a little about what that is and how it ties in with what we've just been talking about?
Absolutely, yep. And this is where we're encouraging it. What's happening on Monday is that Council will be considering the work that's been done by Council's land use strategic planners in terms of future growth options going forward, the settlement pattern. What sort of settlement pattern do we want to look for going forward to 2051? There's two options, pretty obviously. One is a slightly more compact type option where we're looking at possibly more development in our existing urban areas and increasing the densities in those areas while still allowing for some greenfield development, rolling out the greenfield development for people who want to live in the suburbs. And the other one is looking more at the rolling out of the greenfield development, urban development into the greenfield areas, both north and south. The options principally, and it's pretty obvious, fall into those two areas, and both options look at growth at both north and south of our existing urban areas, and with an eye to some of the larger district towns and townships as well. So on Monday, we'll be taking Council through those two options and talking about the pluses and minuses, the pros and cons of those two options. We've had it out on informal public exhibition. This happened after we'd spoken to lots of stakeholders in terms of this process, including the development industry. We have had around 154 or something like that written submissions and submissions through our various links. And many of those submissions are quite well thought through and very good. And as I think we explained to Council in a briefing, there was a bit of a pattern in those submissions as well, which we'll talk to Council about on Monday.
Sort of just keeping in mind, of course, that the projection is that by 2051 there's going to be an extra 65,000 people here. So where are we going to house them? How are we going to house them? And that is what the direction that Council will need, the officers will need on Monday, in what sort of pattern are we going to concentrate our efforts. So, and neither are mutually exclusive, but where's the priority going to be and what we want it to look like. So that's the model of the way that we're going to move forward, and then the planning scheme then comes in underneath that, and that's at the part where we look at the zoning and where we're going to zone up land. And how we're going to facilitate, if it's going to be a more convenience model, how are we going to then encourage that infill in the existing infrastructure. So yes, very important meeting, and thank you, Councillor McDonald, for bringing that up. Okay, the recommendation is that the report of the General Manager Planning and Development Group on the regional development statistics for October 21 be noted by Councillor. Can I have a mover? Councillor Antonio, Councillor Melissa Taylor. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Can I have someone move we adjourn the meeting? Councillor. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you. Councillor Carol Taylor moves we adjourn the meeting, and Councillor Melissa Taylor that we seconds it. All those in favour? Carried. Get your long form morning tea, do you think?
Yeah, councillors like break now.
I think so,
10
yeah.
minutes. Right.
10
Thank you.
minutes, yeah.
Well, good morning all and welcome to the Water and Waste Committee meeting this morning. I'd like to acknowledge all the people that are out there watching on the live streaming, and great to see you watching and being involved in what's happening in your community. I'd also like to thank those of you who are in the room with us today and acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. I'd also acknowledge our General Manager for Water and Waste, Damien. We also have Ray and Paul and Toby, and we also have a leave of absence for Councillor Von Hoff till 12:15. So I'd like to ask Paul to come to the lectern and present the first resolution, please.
Good morning. Right, the first report that we're looking at this morning is about the Hodgson Vale and Valeview water supply. So this is a study that we have completed earlier this year, and the purpose of this report is to present the findings and the recommendations of that study, which is titled the Hodgson Vale and Valeview Water Supply Planning Study, or Planning Report. So this is there for your consideration. Now, this report is an update on a previous study, and it's to look at it and bring it up to the current standards, have a look at the growth into the future. One of the things that we found with the undertaking of this study, there were some pre-existing or still some existing issues in the networks, and particularly the supply to Valeview. So you see there in the cost that has been incorporated into the costings, as well as looking into the future. One of the main items was a new reservoir, and that was on Panoramic Drive. The growth projections, so we've got stated in the report the growth projections is currently being reviewed by our team in SPED as part of the Toowoomba Region Planning Scheme update. This particular study was started before those works were started. So what we have here, even though we provide these growth projections to our SPED, it may not be exactly the same. It will still be very close to what's in the planning scheme because we get approval from them for input into this planning study. The recommendation that comes from this report is that Council endorse the Hodgson Vale and Valeview water supply planning report, and the report be used in the formulation of future capital works plans and informing the local government infrastructure plan. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Do we have any questions for Paul? Councillor Carroll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It just, Paul, the high low pressure areas that have been identified, particularly in Hodgson Vale, and the fire flow, and I can't see where we're going to do anything about it here. Proposed augmentations, I suppose that might help in the future, is it? But with the fire flow, and it does say here that it's recommended that the fire flow be adopted in locations where full service provision cannot be, but this is a fairly populated area in Hodgson Vale, and if we haven't got the proper fire flow there, I suppose they're close enough to you know, when it suits us, we consider them as part of Toowoomba, and then when it doesn't, we consider them as part of the rural area. But I think that, you know, it just concerns me a little bit when they don't have full fire flow there in what is a fairly closely populated area. It is rural res, but, you know, there are only 4,000, the rural res in the old Cambodia show was only 4,000 square metres. And I think, have we got any... Does that piece there say that we're going to, where full provision, service provision cannot be met, does that mean we're going to accept what's there? or are we going to try to rectify it? Thanks.
Okay, with the standards of service that we utilise, we use the Queensland planning guidelines, and in those they have two different standards. One is for what's classed as a small community, and so that incorporates areas that have lots of that, around that 4,000 square metres, and that has a lower fire flows requirement than what an urban fire flow requirement is. The whole of Hodgson Vale, the network, complies with the small community fire flow standard. It doesn't comply with the urban. So that's where the difference is, and it's a question of which category does Hodgson Vale fit into. With bringing it up to the urban standard, there is quite a significant increase in cost in the infrastructure required. However, it does still comply with the current standard for small community.
A follow-up, Madam Chair. It's quite closely populated out there. It's not like a rural res in some other areas. You know, there's quite a large community there. I guess the thing that allays my fears somewhat is that most of those places have got huge tank storage, or quite adequate tank storage that should be required. That I think that it would make me feel far more comfortable if somewhere in the future we had a plan to try to bring that up to scratch, because some of those places, now that they have a water, and you know, some of those blocks can be cut back down, I would think. You know, there's some a little bit over 4,000 in some areas, so I know that there has been some infill out there in Hodgson Vale. So it just worries me a little, but I guess I'm reassured by the fact that they've all got quite large tank storages.
Yes, and it still complies with the small community firefighting standard.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Jebb?
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Through you to Paul. Paul, I just wanted to confirm on page 198, which is Appendix G, talks about the proposed works cost assessments, and 2021, which is the planning horizon, the dollars figures of 2.265 million, 2,265,500. Is that currently in the existing budget to do that work?
No, that would not be in the current budget.
Okay.
So it'll be something that would have to be considered for future budgets.
So just saying 2021 planning horizon, what sort of time frame do you think would be realistic to deliver those items in the 2.265 million?
Maybe that's a question Ray might be able to.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question.
Thanks, Ray.
So we'll adopt it and put it into the capital works program. Then we'll be assessed annually or every 3 years, as the case may be, moving forward, as to the most critical pieces of plant we should be constructing in the next 3-year period. So it will be assessed and weighted accordingly.
Okay, thank you. That's fine. Just not expecting. We're not expecting something to come through at BR2 in regard to this program. It's something that will be forecast through for the next financial year and subsequent years.
Yes, that's
Thank
correct.
you.
Yep.
That's fine. Thanks.
Okay, so any other questions? Okay, so I've got, well, that one was just sorted out for me, but the other one was on page 122. What is L/S in the table talking about the water requirements?
That would be litres per second.
Litres per second?
Yes.
Okay,
So
thank you. So then Councillor Von Hoff had a question which she's asked me to relay, and I won't be able to do an in-depth question like she would have asked if she was here, but she was questioning how accurate and up-to-date the figures were, the population figures were, where they were sourced from and how recent they are.
Yeah, I did mention that one a little bit earlier. So the growth projections for this particular study, they were actually undertaken before the updated or the work that has been started as part of the planning scheme review. In the future, we will review this report again and we'll bring it up to what they are suggesting. In these growth projections that we've got, we do get approval from our team in SPED to say, are these growth projections, is that what you agree with? And we make adjustments according to what they recommend.
So, Paul, have you seen those new figures? Is there much variance?
I haven't personally seen them.
Okay. Well, perhaps we could get an email out about that following. We don't expect everyone to have all the information here, obviously, but perhaps that could be something that could be forwarded to councillors so we're aware.
What would you like forwarded, Councillor Manson?
The updated figures.
They're not here yet. They're not out of Stewartsboro.
Right. So when they do come out then.
Councillors, the growth forecast, the planning scheme and the LGIP will all come through as a package, and that's the numbers that Paul's referring to. When those numbers come out, to the extent that there is, the guys will open up these planning reports which have been adopted by council. This is the mechanism for the capital projects in a coordinated way to get into the capital works program and be prioritised. When the growth program is approved by council, we will look at some of these reports and work out where there's a large material variance and prioritise those. These are all on a very regular schedule to be reviewed, but if there is a large change between when the growth numbers come out and what we've got in here, we'd reprioritise a review of it. Does that help?
Okay, thank you very much. If there's no further questions, could you have one, Councillor Jew?
Just following up on that, it's mentioned in the report, and Councillor Carroll mentioned it earlier, that it's believed that there will be a material difference in what's being done. So what would necessitate a material difference? Is there a percentage of variance of 10% growth or 15% growth?
Yeah, so we don't believe that there will be a big difference between what's in this planning study compared to what will come out. If there is, it could be something like a 20% difference, and the location of that as well is what we look at.
Okay, but basically what we're approving today is a plan as it is today, and it can change given what may well come back, but fundamentally where the reservoir, where things are being built wouldn't change. Is that
Correct,
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, Councillor Tim, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. That's all right. It wasn't up for long. Just wanted to talk about Valeview. They've been on high level for quite some time, and now I read we're trucking water into them, and your proposal is the connection to the bulk water supply. Is there dates associated with that, or is this just a long-term study? Or could I just have a bit more detail around that project?
Toby, Paul, do you want me to do it?
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
Councillors, we have been in negotiations for some period of time now to obtain an easement. I'm happy to bring something confidentially to council in relation to where that is.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. And the follow-up question from that is if preliminary idea of a pipeline to the south of us to Warwick, would that be the same route, or is it a different area altogether?
And that would be a different route, so Valeview would be dealt with separately.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much.
That thing that Damien mentioned, it's what's holding the project up. It's disappointing. Anyway. Okay, so if there's no further questions... Mayor? Thank you. Moved by Mayor Paul, seconded by Councillor Melissa. Those in favour? Excellent. Carried. And then we move on to item 4, which is the Cecil Plains Sewage Catchment Study. Are you doing that too, Paul?
I am, yes.
Excellent. You're
I have
very
the
popular
pleasure
today.
of this one. Okay, so this here, this report is to present the findings of the Cecil Plains Sewage Catchment Study Planning Report, and this is the first time a full study has been undertaken on this particular network, and this was to compare it to our existing design requirements. And it's good to know that the system itself, as we suspected, does meet all of our current standards. The costs that are included in the report are related to the wastewater treatment plant, and these are works that have been previously identified. And hopefully this one is a nice easy one for us. It's one of the smaller towns in our region, very limited growth potential or expectations in that area. The recommendation is that Council endorse the Cecil Plains Sewage Catchment Study Planning Report, and the report be used once again in the formulation of future capital works plans and informing the local government infrastructure plan.
Thanks, Paul. Does anyone have any questions for Paul? No, quite simple and great. You know, the rain that's been around, Cecil Plains Weir is overflowing and all is wonderful out there, I imagine. Maybe a few crops a bit hurt, but thank you for that. And if I could get a mover, please. Councillor Jeff, a seconder. Councillor Bill. Those in favour? Excellent, carried. Thank you. And that ends the Water and Waste Committee meeting. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, okay, right, thanks. Thank you. Good morning, councillors, and welcome to the Infrastructure Committee meeting, Toowoomba Regional Council. The meeting is open to the public and is also being live streamed. I'd like to welcome anyone who's watching online and thank them very much for being present. I'd also like to thank the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors, our acting CEO and all staff members that are in the room, and thank you very much. I'd also open the meeting with the acknowledgement of the Aboriginal parties whose song lines traverse these lands that we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, the Gaibil and the Jadawa peoples and the Bigambul people, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and the bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. We note everyone's present except we note there's a leave of absence for Councillor Rebecca Von Hoff until I think it's 12:20, I think, and there's a declaration from Councillor Jeff McDonald on item number 3. Thank you, Councillor Jeff.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. It's item number 3, Regional Active and Public Transport Advisory Committee proposed key initiatives. I inform this meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in the matter as defined by Section 150EN of the Local Government Act 2009. The nature of my interest is as follows. The declarable conflict of interest arises because I part own properties at 435 Ruthven Street and 2 Club Lane, Toowoomba in the CBD. The initiatives discussed in this agenda item are specific to the Toowoomba CBD. However, my interest would be no greater than any other property owners or business owners in the Toowoomba CBD. I wish to participate in the decision in relation to this matter. I acknowledge that eligible councillors must now determine pursuant to 150ES of the Local Government Act whether I may participate in the decision about the matter, including voting on the matter, must leave the meeting, including any area set aside for the public, and stay away from the meeting while the eligible councillors discuss and vote on the matter. Or 3, may participate in the decision about the matter subject to conditions. And councillors really refer more importantly to the initiative item number 2. It's an initiative that council will investigate and adopt improvements for the city centre that provide better experiences for people walking and cycling, focusing on the potential for quick wins.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Over to councillors, but our acting CEO has mentioned this is ordinary council business as well. So, any questions for Councillor McDonald? So we require a motion. Would somebody like to move the mayor that... thank you. I would... Any more to gain or lose than anyone else that's sitting around the table. It is a cycling improvements, and I haven't really seen you in Lycra, Councillor McDonald. Thank you. I know you do, yes. A lot of us are, but we're probably not there every day. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor James O'Shea. Any questions or comments, councillors? So we've got the wording there, have we? Decision of meeting by including voting on the matter. And the reason for that, there's nothing more to... it's ordinary council business, and that there has nothing to no more to gain or lose than any other person. So we'll vote on that, councillors. Those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Sorry, I'm getting a bit funny with this turning on and off. I'll hand over to Rodney to introduce item 3, which is the initiatives, the proposed key initiatives that have come to us through the RHAPTAC committee, which is chaired by our Councillor Melissa and put together by Brian Mackay and Sue Hendren. And I'd ask Rod if he could introduce that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor, and good morning, councillors. This is a fairly straightforward report, but it builds on, I guess, the previous work of previous RHAPTAC committees in former terms of council, a number of community forums. I think we've held 3 now, probably since around 2015, to sort of explore with our community what their desires are for our active transport, our walking and cycling. The latest forum in November 2019 was very well attended, very well run too, with international speakers and Skyping in. It was a very impressive day. And the outcomes of the forum have certainly been presented to our recent RHAPTAC, and they're presented in Attachment 1 for Council's awareness. I guess with any of our advisory committees, we have been doing work with them to help them clarify what their strategic objectives and goals would be for the current term of council. And the RHAPTAC, despite a few delays with members resigning and new members arriving, we certainly have, I think, now a very active and engaged and quite strategic committee in this sense. And they have asked that we put forward these 6 key initiatives for council's awareness and support for officers to continue working with them in this regard for future reports to council as and when we make progress in these areas.
Thank you, Rod. Sorry, my bad. I recognise our portfolio leader, Councillor Melissa Taylor. Councillors, you'll note there that the recommendation says taking note of the background information, including the 2019 Transport and Active Living Forum infographic, and support the Regional and Active Public Transport Advisory Committee's 6 key initiatives, which are there, and note officers will continue to work with the RHAPTAC Advisory Committee to progress these initiatives for future consideration by Council in due course. Are there any questions? Councillor Tim?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Rod. Look, I welcome these initiatives. I'm just, I suppose, wanting a little bit more clarification of what the recommendation is meaning. It's more just noted, and we're using it for future use. There's no specific ideals around it at this stage. Is my reading that correctly to you, to Rod, please?
That's my understanding, Councillor Tim, and I'd ask Rodney to comment on that. Thank you.
Look, certainly these are directions. I think a number of the recommendations here in time will potentially result in further reports to Council, particularly matters such as an active transport policy, which would be, I guess, a complementary document to the work we're doing in our sustainable transport strategy and implementation planning space. But we're also finding the committee is very interested in helping us identify where quick wins and improvements can be made. Interested members are actually doing a workshop this morning on the first stage of Russell Street to share their observations and try and draw some key learnings from that. So I think really this particular committee has become very much a part of how we consult with the community and work in this space, and I think we're certainly getting some very good feedback. So I think there will be some further reports to come back to Council in due course. How long, I'm not sure. Trying to develop policy of this nature, how long's a piece of string? It may take 6 months, it may take longer. But certainly I think they're directions that we're all generally supportive of, and are very happy to work with an engaged committee in this area.
And if I might comment, councillors, just on that, we have, we get to places by, we've had 2 RAP tax and a little committee that preceded that straight after amalgamation. And mostly the last, we've evolved into what I believe is a very, as Rodney said, very balanced RAP tax advisory committee with this here, and we're starting really to put a little bit, the committee is starting to put a little bit more focus on walking, because even cyclists walk. So, it's really, I think it's become more balanced and whatever, we've evolved into that. So, yes, sorry. Councillor Melissa, did you want to comment? Oh, sorry, Councillor Tim, did you have another question?
Oh, no, just thank you, Rod, for clarifying that. I really appreciate and endorse the ideas put forward in the 2019 forum. I just didn't hope we weren't voting on some of the potential future initiatives at this stage, but thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Tim. Councillor Melissa?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to endorse Rod's comments. As Chair of that committee, the committee itself are extraordinary in their passion and their drive to, sorry about the pun on words, their drive to see a more active transport feel within our city. I also want to say that I'm very impressed with what they think of strategically, but also bring it back to what we can have as quick wins as well. And they do recognise, the constraints of council, but are also very passionate about putting forward their ideas and strategic direction. So I do recommend those 6 initiatives. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Melissa. Councillor Tim, you had another question? Oh, so you're happy. Was there any other questions, comments, councillors? Oh, sorry, Councillor Nancy.
That's okay. Thanks, Madam Chair. So I was just a little bit concerned too about the 6 initiatives, and acknowledging RAPTAC. It's great that they're proactive and got that drive, as Councillor Melissa said. I just wonder that we don't bypass the terms of reference, and that is that all these things come back to council in doing this process. They are quite broad statements, so we just need to make sure that it all goes through due process is probably my only concern. And that's the great thing about live streaming. We record all these queries and
most definitely,
and reassurances that is the case.
Most definitely. And we can, that's exactly how it works. They're advisory committees, they are passionate and very, very committed, but they understand, as we do, that they all have to come back through council. Thank you. Councillor Jeff?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a question, just for my own mind, to understand a couple of the items here, and I don't disagree with any of them, I have to say, but I just wondered whether item 3 and 4, which both refer to item 1, are they separate reports at the moment, or do they sit somewhere else, and they're suggesting that they should sit with the active transport policy, which I don't disagree with, I have to say.
Okay, Councillor McDonald, I think this shows in part the evolution of thinking within the committee and even within council. I guess over the last decade we've tended to plan for cycling separately. Walking has only really come to light in the last 3 to 5 years, and again, we've tended to plan for that separately. But a number of these recommendations here are actually, the committee is suggesting to us that we need to recognise that these two facilities can and should be integrated for the betterment of both, not just treated in isolation. So really, the last point there is, when we're looking at projects, these are projects that are already in our capital works program, or projects that we're looking to propose through reports to council. The challenge for all of us is how can we better recognise the needs of both walking and all the different forms of cycling in a more integrated way, and deliver a more integrated solution when we go and do these works. So those recommendations are actually, I think, the committee recognising itself that while we have these separate bodies of work, they can be integrated and should be integrated.
So therefore, Madam Chair, if I could just follow up, number 6 is probably part of that same process, which is the more integration and corridor analysis. So in summary, you could almost say that a major goal for this group would be to work with council developing the active transport policy,
yes,
which covers off on basically 4 others.
Yes.
Would that be a reasonable summary?
That's a pretty good summary, Councillor.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to get my mind around how that's said. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Takal.
Thanks, Chair. Just a comment, if I may, on the attachment 1 down the bottom in the grey box. It's pleasing to see the integration across other council strategies and policies. There, with a number of those mentioned, I guess the trick will be around the prioritisation of projects that fall out of this and how they speak to those other strategies and policies. And hopefully we can progress some initiatives collectively out of those strategies and policies that are listed there. So it's good to see the whole of council approach. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cole, I agree. So, Councillor O'Shane?
Sorry, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, just a quick comment. I just thought, listening to the conversation we've had around the table, I think this is, looking at this, and we talk about all the different advisory committees we have, the role that they have, the input that they can have, how people can be involved in a process and understanding. And I think this is a really good example of how the advisory committees have benefit and that opportunity for people within our community to be engaged and be involved with these processes. So for them to see the process where this document obviously is said through RAPTAC and they've come up with these initiatives, has come through that process to then be presented to council for consideration today, I just think it's a really good example of the value and the input that we can have from members of the community through these advisory committees. So I think it's a really good example.
Thank you, Councillor O'Shea. I agree, and I think it's a sign of how we've matured over the years to get to where we are as a council as well, and our community is maturing and things are changing. So I think it's quite timely that we have this and consider it. No more questions? You're happy to move? Moved, Councillor Melissa. Seconded, Councillor Tim. No more comment? Those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. So we move on to item 4, the Bridge Street Quarry Rehabilitation Project. I'd like to recognise Councillor Kerry Shine, who chairs the Bridge Street Quarry Advisory Committee, and probably call up Lindsay? No? Is it Liam? Lee, sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble. Liam, sorry, thank you, Liam. Liam Falk, and we've got Principal Project Manager Lindsay Jobling with us. Thank you, Lindsay, as well.
Morning, councillors. So this report follows the information session that was held 3 or 4 weeks ago. So essentially, following the KPMG report, which was finalised in 2018, we've progressed the first stage of the Bridge Street Quarry rehabilitation. We've engaged a specialist consultant, Groundwork Plus. We've undertaken detailed site investigations, and we've now completed the rehabilitation report, which, if you recall, details 6 options to rehabilitate the site. So we've workshopped this with the Bridge Street Quarry Development Advisory Committee, and we've determined 2 preferred options. The strongly preferred option was strategy 4, which was minor excavation of the central tongue, or the central bench as we call it, and using that material to rehabilitate some of the high-risk slopes in the area. And the second preference was strategy 1, which is essentially just using bunding and offsets to make the site safe from a geotechnical perspective. So in the recommendations, we're recommending that we proceed with the 2 recommended options from the Bridge Street Quarry Advisory Development Committee and progress options 4 and 1 to a detailed design phase. And that's
Thank you very much, Liam. And I think most of us were involved because they were all on display over at the Oaks Hotel, where we had a meeting over there, and the advisory committee went around, had a look at them all, and it was open to councillors. I hope you all had an opportunity to go over and have a look.
We also did an information session.
And we did an information session. Yes, thank you, Mike, we did. So are there any questions? I think you're all familiar with what the 2 options are. Are there any questions of Liam or Lindsay? No? So the recommendations there, are there any questions or alterations that you want to make to the recommendation?
Yes, Councillor.
Sorry,
No,
Councillor Shine.
No, if I could, I just foreshadow that I'd like to move an amendment to the recommendations that's been given to the officer there to bring it up in relation to a new paragraph 3.
Sorry, Councillor Summerfield, is it possible to enlarge that question?
It's
Thank
on
you.
screen, yeah. So the only change is it's a new paragraph 3, new paragraph altogether. Receive the detailed design of the preferred rehabilitation strategies as recommended in the Bridge Street Quarry Rehabilitation Strategy in a suitable time frame before 31st of March or March 31, 2022, to allow consideration by Council for the inclusion of partial stroke all rehabilitation work in the 2022-23 budget, funded through the relevant provision.
Well,
You'd have to see if someone seconded it.
is there a seconder for that? Councillor Melissa Taylor? Councillor Summerfield? Questions or
I just
clarifications?
that I'm just trying to clarify. I don't think there's a problem with that based on the wording that's there, that would indicate that it would have to go through the criteria process. So priorities would decide whether that would actually get up or not anyway, wouldn't it?
I think, councillors, that's a very difficult time frame. We've got, it's March 31st, which we virtually break down for a month, I suppose, close down. And should we have weather conditions or something else, I mean, it's very difficult. It's only probably really 2 months away.
So sorry, I was only thinking about the financial side of it. I didn't take into consideration.
It's a very tight time frame for councils, and I think that would mean if we accept this, we've got to recognise that there might be other things that get pushed out. The financial considerations will come through council as it is, but anyway, I just urge caution on that. I think it's just a bit too tight.
Question.
Anyway, questions, councillor. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Could I have a
Yes,
comment from the officer about the ability to produce the rehabilitation strategy by March 31?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Megan.
Yeah, that time frame is achievable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff?
Madam Chair, it was really just the same question, was to get
Yes.
an officer opinion, because what we're talking about is a detailed design
Yes,
here.
of those 2 designs.
Yeah, and there's dollars in the budget for this current financial year to do it, so immediate understanding that it may bring things forward a little bit to achieve that, but it is incumbent on this council, based on a council decision, that we do consider the Bridge Street Quarry at each annual budget,
Yes.
which this will allow to do.
Yes, Councillor Jeff, but that's two options that need to be scoped out, so, and they're not
Madam
at
Chair,
this
we've
point.
heard from the officers that the timeframe's
Thank you.
okay, so I'm happy with that.
Thank you. I'll ask the acting CEO to comment.
Yeah, I'll just, we'll aim for that date, and we should have a good enough estimate for council at that point. But, just note, I just want to make comment that it may not be 100% complete by the 31st of March.
So, councillors, with that, that's my concern. But any other comment? Obviously, we'll have enough to know what we're considering. Other comments? No? Someone like to move that? Moved by you, Councillor Shine. Seconder? Councillor Musso, we've got that, sorry. Yeah. Those in favour? Those against? It's carried, thank you. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, Liam, and thank you, Lindsay, down the back. We didn't need you, but thank you for being with us today. Thank you. That ends the Infrastructure Committee meeting for December, can you believe it? And now we'll hand back over to planning. Thank you. Thanks, councillors. That does make me a little bit uneasy, to be honest.
Okay. Thank you, councillors. We're just going to reopen the Planning and Development Committee meeting. I think I'd remember from 1 month to the next, but I don't. And I need someone to move that we move into confidential. Councillor McMahon, Councillor Carol Taylor, all those in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Item number 7 is the Development Services Planning and Environment Court Appeals and Compensation Claims for November 21. Can I have someone move that we accept that report? Councillor McMahon and Councillor Carl. All those in favour? It's carried. And item number 8 is the Regional Enforcement Actions for November 2021. Can I have someone move the acceptance of that report? Councillor Shine and Councillor Carl. All those in favour? It's accepted. Thank you. That is the end of the meeting, 11:39, record time. Must be to do with you, Mike.